everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons is 1 week old, so as we quietly sing happy 1 week birthday to End of Dragons, I thought it'd be a great time to actually make a video for a 1 week review. This one is going to be a lot more conversational, chit-chatty, solo podcast type vibe, so I don't have like a solid script. I have some bullet points to hopefully keep me on track, but as we hopefully know, I go on many tangents and I go on adventures and down various dark roads and alleyways. So you're in for a ride. The layout of this video is going to be me talking about different aspects of this expansion, from story to gameplay, open world, for the end game to the mastery system. And then towards the end, I thought that we would get into some more controversial yet brave stuff, because here on this channel, I like to stay controversial yet brave. Not stay, but dabble, I should say. So if you want to avoid any possible spoilers that I might discuss, but you really want to go in completely doe-eyed, fresh, then maybe kind of hop out towards the end of this video. But let's get started. First, let's actually talk about the length of the story and how much time I spent in the story and how much time is kind of required to succeed and finish the story. I thought that I really enjoyed this pace. I've played through it once entirely, and I'm now slowly beginning to do my second playthrough on stream on Twitch. So if you want to catch me live there, it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. The story I thought was really good. Like a quality experience, felt decent, felt like I didn't just breeze through it. Of course, when you're playing it for your first time, you're getting used to the mechanics, you don't know what you're really doing, so it adds time to it. On subsequent playthroughs, it'll probably be a little bit faster, but I think overall it was a perfectly solid 5-act storyline. Another part about the narrative of this expansion was the attention to the cinematics. They used cinematics so beautifully, so effortlessly. It had great moments. It really emphasized and punctuated a lot of the story beats throughout this expansion, and I loved it so much. We didn't really get a lot of that in Guild Wars 2 for some expansions. We kind of got a little bit in Heart and Thorns. Path of Fire, there was like 2 cinematics, and the Dragons, they really put a lot of time and effort into that, so loved those cinematics. Of course, there were a couple bugs. This was launch week. We're all kind of testing the game and helping them refine it for the first week or two, but I didn't really encounter many story bugs, but I did encounter 2. One where a hero point would not allow you to progress, and the second bug was a crash after witnessing a cinematic. I loaded in, thankfully it saved my location. I just had to do another encounter. It didn't crash the second time, so just a couple minor bugs that made it slightly more difficult, or just you kind of noticed it. But from my end, they've been fixed. On the patch notes, I have not encountered them again. And I'm going to talk about the ending a little bit. Not going to talk about specific details, but just so far, like the quality of the end and the final act. There seems to be a consistent negative, in my opinion, from expansions, is that the ending feels like it's almost rushed. Now, I don't know if that's me talking from a huge lore fan that just wants more and more and more. Guild Wars 2's expansions tend to really pick up the pace at the very end, maybe to their detriment. And this one, while it doesn't like instantaneously end, I would have liked maybe 2 more story chapters where we really got to see how everyone comes together to tackle the final conflict. It kind of mimicked another storyline where all of a sudden things just kind of fall into place, it seems. That's my really only real gripe about the story, is I would have liked maybe 1 or 2 more chapters, but overall I think it was still really good. And there is an achievement to do it in the quote-unquote true ending way, where you do the final map meta event before you go into the final instance, and that's like the quote-unquote true chronological ending for the expansion. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about gameplay for the open world experience and elite specializations. Objectively, I don't know if you heard me, objectively, and in my opinion, this is the best open world experience for Guild Wars 2. The mobs, boons, conditions, movement. So many mechanics are implemented into these mobs out in the open world that you really would never engage with from the other expansions. Heart of Thorns, we saw a little bit more movement, some slight more condition damage, Path of Fire, we saw Barrier, which kind of prolonged certain encounters, but we never saw Guild Wars 2 flourish in the way that it has, where mobs are more frequently applying conditions and boons on themselves, albeit I would like maybe a little bit more boon play, but I think it was really, really strong. And even some mobs play around with stealth, but I've noticed that like they're quote unquote like stealthed in a phase of stealth, but you can't actually reveal them. I think that's maybe a missed opportunity to play a little bit around reveal. The one thing that I'm a little surprised not to see a lot of is Barrier. There is not a lot of Barrier in this expansion, and the only enemies that I've noticed apply it are the Naga. And I think the Naga are really only seen in the very first map, so you don't really play around with the Naga all that much. Maybe in Living World we'll see more Naga and more Naga that apply Barrier. Now a little bit about the elite specs. The elite specs, I'm gonna be honest, they did not start off as my favorite. They did not make me live, laugh, love, in a sense. And I still believe Heart of Thorns has that award for the best overall package of elite specs. They felt very realized. There weren't any lore ties to those elite specs, which for some people might be a little bit of a ding on their scoreboard, but I still feel like Heart of Thorns had a really solid idea. It wasn't overpowered. Path of Fire went too overpowered. End of Dragons, I think, is a really good balance level, but it just hasn't been my number one package deal. However, as I'm playing, I'm appreciating the elite specializations more and more as a whole. There are still 3 problem areas for me, and this would be the Catalyst Hammer, the Orb abilities, the Virtuoso traits, and just the Untamed as its entire elite spec. Those would be my 3 weakest areas for the specializations for End of Dragons. So if they, touch on those over time, maybe I would consider End of Dragons to be an extremely strong package deal for elite specs. Also, Willbender. I don't like that they're going down kind of condition paths. Don't let Willbender be Condi damage. Get rid of Searing Pact. Put back Boon Pact. Get rid of condition. The more I play, the more I see how these elite specs fit into the mechanical design for End of Dragons. There's a lot of movement. There's not a whole lot of boon corruption, which is interesting. But there's just condition application, a lot of movement, power damage, not a lot of ranged abilities, which I think the Virtuoso needs to play more into, that ranged power crit spike damage. That's what I would like to see. Now for the end game. Once again, objectively, para mí, I believe that this expansion has the strongest and potentially best long-running end game out of any of the expansions. I think they are very polished strike missions. The strike missions themselves have a lovely cadence, a gradual challenge that they increase over time. They have really interesting mechanics that I've never really seen anywhere else, or we very rarely seen in boss encounters. So I absolutely love these strike missions and cannot recommend them enough. If you want to play endgame content, strike missions are super fast and easy to get into. There are no enrage timers. You learn at your own pace. You learn at your own group's pace, I should say. But the only disappointment for the strike missions, I would say, actually I have 2. First, I would say the second strike mission is not my favorite in terms of a difficulty scale. I think it is the weakest one when you compare all the strike missions against each other. I don't know, it just didn't really give me that sense of challenge that the first one brought, the third one brought, and the fourth one brought. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but considering it's the second one, I was expecting somewhat of a little bump in mechanical awareness or mechanical engagement. So I would like to see a couple, maybe like more boons added to the second boss, because the second boss is a harbinger, maybe a couple more minions or one more phase, something along those lines. Or maybe have that boss do more damage to one specific target. And this bleeds into my second disappointment with the strike missions, is that there are no clear indicators of how these strike missions tank. And I don't think that there is a clear channel for players to take on that role of the tank, or the one that manages the boss's attack angles or aggro. And considering Spectre has been introduced into End of Dragons, it's almost a necessity for single target healing to find a place. But in order to do that, you need to input more consistent avenues for people to tank and for bosses to latch their aggro onto. I was a little bit disappointed to see that. I think that this is maybe more of a groundwork scenario where they're testing things. They could definitely retroactively go back and add like toughness tanking or tanking via taunting, because taunt is a condition that has fully fallen off the radar, I feel, of development. Not a single elite spec got taunt. There's a lot of enemies that you fight in Cantha that say they taunt, but they don't actually taunt you. It's just, it's a forgotten condition. And I assume in the future there will be more single target healing abilities, and certain professions will be reworked to fit that mold. So you maybe want to get on that, or at least have communication on that front. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Masteries before we get into the controversial topic, okay? So Masteries, solid Masteries, not out of this world, not really, really weak. I think these Masteries are a nice middle ground for the collection of Masteries that we have. I like that the Jade Bot and fishing are cool directions to go down when they are very character bound. A lot of the Masteries are account bound, which means you get the Mastery, they are instantaneously applicable to every single character that you have. But in the case of the Jade Bot and the fishing, you have to get for each character a Jade Power Core, or your tackle and your bait and your fishing pole. So now I'm going to get into the possible controversies and issues of the first week. Now, in this section, in the comments, we must treat people with kindness, because I'm going to talk a lot about public etiquette and entitlement and just really shady actions on people on people's front, and which might be propagated in the community. We're gonna talk about it, but we must be respectful, because this is a conversation that needs to be discussed, because it's causing a lot of divides, and it's so wild, because it's about a video game, and we're breaking friendships over this. Like, I can't. It's so cringy. Before we go there, I'm gonna talk about the more, objective problems. Bugs. A lot of people are saying, and I've seen in comments, that this expansion is a bug-riddled mess. From my perspective, I have not run into many bugs. Maybe I'm just completely lucky. And I think that a lot of the times the signaling around bugs, one person mentions one bug or two bugs that they've encountered, the next person does, and you get this maybe overall sense that this entire expansion is just bug-riddled. But we have to look at the context. This was literally the first 6 days. Today just hit a week. And Saturday and Sunday, they don't really patch things all that often. So this is the first week. This is the first opportunity for ArenaNet to test their expansion on this scale, on this magnitude. And that goes for any expansion, any live service MMO, any live service game where multiple people play it. You cannot predict bugs necessarily on the scale of a launch where thousands upon thousands of people are in maps doing things simultaneously. Things are moving around, maybe just coincidentally. Something never came up in QA testing. So this is, people who are maybe getting overly emotional about bugs, I would really advise you to take a breather, because this is the first week. I like to imagine this as maybe the head start week. Most of the time when you play a game that is just launched, you in a sense are the testers. You are like the final phase of the testers before they can really refine out those bugs. So I would just say, take a breather. I imagine these bugs will be fixed in the next couple of weeks. And then even after that, we might find a couple bugs. But ArenaNet has been I gotta take a moment to praise ArenaNet. They have been on the bugs. Launch week, 2 or 3 patches a day with like 6, 8, 10 patches of bug fixes, really good bug fixes to make sure people can play the game and like literally just play the game. I think that's the most important part. Now I'm going to be talking about the controversy surrounding, this isn't a controversy, but the discussion surrounding the final map meta. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the area, so if you don't want spoilers, this is when you should probably pause and head off. The final map, I'm going to use the name. The final map is called Dragon's End. I know, very fitting of the expansion, End of Dragons. The final map is called Dragon's End. It takes place in the Jade Sea, and it is a hybrid between an explorable map and a meta map, which is really interesting and I really appreciate. I freaking love this map. I love this map. Aesthetically, it is pretty pleasing. I am excited to see more of the sprawling Jade Ocean and the Jade Sea. if they decide to go down into those territories in future releases. But I think this zone is really beautiful, and the storyline behind this map is really interesting, with all the various dragon magics kind of coming together, you could say. And when it comes to the difficulty surrounding the final meta, this is a novelty. We will probably never, I shouldn't say never, but there will be very few instances in the future, in my opinion, where we have this level of difficulty and we have this level of a necessity of game understanding. And I'm not talking about necessarily accessibility. I'm talking about challenge. I'm talking about the way in which you understand movement, in the way in which you understand taking a moment to breathe, to react to what's going on around you. We will very rarely see this level of difficulty again. And I want to say that this difficulty is a novelty. And I think that's maybe something people are forgetting, that this is something that is super rare when you have an open world meta that is not unkillable, because we have seen now handfuls of people, I should say handfuls, a decent amount of people seem to be finishing this map with the help of a lot of community members and organizations and groups of people coming together to clear these things. And these are not isolated groups. These are public groups. A lot of people are opening public forums and opening public channels to say, hey, people, if you want to play this meta event and play it and maybe succeed and have a solid chance of succeeding perhaps, come into these channels and come along. We'll try to help you out. And that's really the crux of what Guild Wars 2's community is. But then we fall into something we never really talk about. Toxic casualism. We have a lot of conversations around toxic elitism, gatekeeping, etc., etc. Because oftentimes we are faced with them and those individuals being the villain of games, where you bash people, or you send hate messages to people, or you tell people to, you know, you just are really bad at the game and you can't do this isn't for you, etc., etc. Now we're kind of seeing the flip side of that, where we have toxic casualism, where people are intentionally griefing, intentionally sending very thorough hate messages to people, and are saying that they are terrible people because they are enjoying this content, and that they shouldn't be enjoying this content because they haven't yet succeeded in the meta event, even though this expansion literally just turned 1 week old. It is getting to a point that it is cringy, in the same way that toxic elitism is cringy. Like, y'all, it's a game. Chill out. I think because Guild Wars 2 has been such a friendly, easy, emphasis on easy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's objectively true that Guild Wars 2, especially in the open world, is very easy, to the point where people do not have to really think or understand game mechanics. In this situation, this meta event really wants you to understand the mechanics. And similar to that of strike missions, where they seem to be increasingly more difficult and compel you to learn more about the fights, I think the same can be said for this meta events in End of Dragons. And so when you get to the final map, this is the final meta map. This is when maybe development was like, hey, at this point, you've understood the mechanics. We're going to throw all the mechanics at you. We are trying to teach you the game as much as we can as you go through the story, as you go through the events. And maybe that's where they were coming from. But it seems like people are skipping the other meta events and going straight to the final meta, when perhaps they might not be ready, or they might not actually have their understanding or really master these. Not that they can't master these, but that they maybe haven't. Or some people, I imagine, choose not to. And that is totally fine. Everyone can make their decisions at the end of the day. We're all free human beings in the world of Tyria. We can make our decisions. It gets bad when that inhibits and overshadows and digs at people's enjoyment of a meta, of a sentiment of challenge, of a sentiment of having a group effort. It's massively multiplayer online, so it's not like you're going at this alone. You can rely on friends, you can talk with friends, you can make new friends, you can do these things. It's just a matter of, do you want to? So overall, don't be a toxic casual. Don't be a toxic elitist. You can freely be an elitist. Be kind to people. You can be casual, but be kind to people. The element of toxic is really important. And when you start to sabotage things, bad talk people and developers, that's when you do not become a productive community member or a productive player in an MMO. So if people want to talk about mechanics, that's where I really respect, where people can say, hey, I'm having issues, or I'm having thoughts around this fight. I can respect the challenge, but how can we tweak certain things to make it slightly more understandable for just maybe a group that isn't super coordinated, but still, you know, we have to bring our A game. That is where I really value that conversation and that dialogue. So let me talk a little bit about the mechanics. I've played this meta event twice. I have not killed it. I want to play it a couple more times because honestly, I want to see if I can get it with this current balancing. However, despite my respect for this level of difficulty, do think there are some key issues within the fight that are still illogical when you look at the game design. First of all, United Legion Way Station. We gotta get rid of it. Chief, we gotta get rid of it. Has to go. The United Legion Way Station is inherently and literally a gatekeep. You have to have Icebrood Saga Masteries in order to utilize that way station, have access to the maps, and have access to that resource to gain the EMP. The EMP is a power-crept mastery trait. And that's the whole antithesis of what a mastery system should be. Guild Wars 2 has never really been about a huge spike in power creep, but the EMPs in the United Legion Way Station has dramatically increased the power creep for crowd control abilities in this game. United Legion Way Station, you gotta go. You gotta go or be heavily reworked to nerf a lot of the crowd control abilities, specifically EMP. EMP does far too much crowd control damage, and in turn, the fights have been designed with that in mind, because many people will use EMPs, and it basically does about half of the boss's Defiance bar, which then you have to rely on your own crowd control abilities, but your crowd control abilities are inherently weaker than EMP, so it's almost as if EMP doesn't even matter, because by and large, Defiance bars, at least from my time playing and what I'm seeing, is Defiance bars are not able to reliably be broken despite people bringing a lot of CC and using it appropriately. EMP, you gotta go. I'm sorry, buddy. Leave it to Icebrood Saga. I think also the United Legion Way Station has poisoned the rest of the game from Core to Heart of Thorns and to Path of Fire. Leave it to the Icebrood Saga maps, and that should be it. Additionally, if we're going to talk about the EMP and the United Legion Way Station and special action keys, the Icebrood Saga strike missions, get rid of those special action keys. Those strike missions would be increasingly more interesting and actually teach people the game if you got rid of the Essence system and the United Legion Way Station to use for break bars. Get rid of it, it's gotta go, if we're actually caring about the health of this game and how we teach players the mechanics. Defiance bars in turn would need to be looked at. I think that Defiance bars in the world of EMP being rid of would need to be brought down to a logical scale where you can rely on players' crowd control abilities to, more often than not, break the Defiance bars. There may be some phases where you are not able to break the Defiance bars for a multitude of reasons, but I think players should rely on your skills rather than picking up a gate-kept mastery line. Speaking about Defiance bars, let's talk about a specific mechanic in this fight, whirlpools. Those whirlpools, the only way you can break players out of those whirlpool traps is by breaking their Defiance bar. However, their Defiance bar is astronomically large. It scales horrendously. You should really be able to break it by like 2 or 3 people using their crowd control abilities to free players. Because ultimately, if you get caught in a whirlpool, no one is coming to save your ass. Absolutely no one is coming to save your ass because it takes so much Defiance bar damage, including EMPs, to break you out of them. And like 3 or 4 people get trapped in them per phase. So you're dead. It's a really bad mechanic the way it is because of the Defiance bar health. If you balance it, maybe it could be a totally fine encounter that people actually engage with to free their allies to get them in the fight faster. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about, this isn't technically a mechanic of the fight, but more so a mechanic of the map. And Dragon's End only fits 60 people. It caps at a hard 60. I believe if we don't really touch more of the mechanics, If we, balance defiance bars around a non-EMP world, we pay attention to the whirlpool defiance bar. The only other thing that I really would recommend to maybe increase some of the flexibility and ease of non-super committed groups would be to increase the map cap from 60 to around 70 or 75. I personally would sit it around 75, just so 5 extra players could be in each of the 3 splits to maybe increase the speed at which certain events go by, and etc, etc. That's really that's what I would like to see be changed to maybe witness how many more people are getting wins and the overall discussion around the fight, because I don't think the final fight's mechanics are really the issue. I don't think that these mechanics are super one-hitty. There are a couple of them, but there aren't it's not like every single turn you're going down or you're dying and it's unfair. I think the fight can be pretty fair. The last little topic is the RNG. Maybe I would like to see the final fight when the boss swims over and changes over to the other side of the arena, increase the cooldown between that by like 5-8 seconds, just to give a little bit more time for people to get to that place and to do some damage. But overall, I like that there is a lot of movement in the fight, so I really wouldn't want that to disappear per se. So those would really be my suggestions. Get rid of the way station, look at the defiance bars, maybe increase the cap of the map, and finally maybe look at the frequency of the boss changing and maybe increase the gap by just a little bit. I think overall it would still require a challenge. It would still present a challenge. It would still require people to be skillful and to engage with the mechanics and even fail. It is okay to fail, and it's okay to lose. The final thing that I would say for this are the rewards. If we do want, and I think this could be applicable to a lot of End of Dragons meta events, the rewards for the End of Dragons meta events need to be increased. They objectively do, particularly Dragon's End. I think that I haven't killed it yet, so I don't technically know the amount of currency you get, but I imagine you maybe like a gold or 2, or maybe you don't get any gold at all. In the case of there not being enough gold, I would probably sit this meta event appropriately at a 5 gold reward. And maybe there is a particular currency that you get from doing this. It's called the Memory of Oreen. For completing this encounter, you will get 5 Memories of Oreen. However, when you look at the other meta events and events in game that grant you the Memory of Oreen, you have encounters like Dragon Storm, Dragon Fall, and the Death-Branded Shatterer. This event gives you 5. Guess how much and how many those other events give you? 5, 5, and 3, respectively. With Dragon's End being objectively the hardest, that is illogical. This event should either give you 10 Memories of Oreen, or look at the other events that are astronomically easier, and bring that number from 5 down to a 3. And for that Death-Branded Shatterer, bring it down to like a 2. I don't think that the number of Memories of Oreen that you get from succeeding in this boss fight should be equal to the others because of the difficulty and the time commitment for this particular meta. This one needs to be buffed. Yesterday. It should have been buffed yesterday, but the next best time would be today or tomorrow. It's a little late today, but I would honestly say increase gold. Maybe increase a little bit of karma if people need it. And ultimately, increase the amount of Memories of Oreen. And that's the controversial topic, everyone. That's really my first week review. I'm honestly, genuinely having a blast with this expansion like none other. I think that this is a solid experience. I think the bugs will be continued to fix. I wouldn't really worry too much about that. The strike missions are a great avenue for endgame. It gives a great window of opportunity to have consistent strike missions, to have strike mission guilds, to have strike mission tournaments even, to have fun events around strike missions. I'm really excited to see where strike missions go in the future. And overall, this is a great expansion for people and newer players to learn how to play the game. The only thing I would say is be comfortable with failure. Don't go in expecting everything to be handed to you on your first try when you get to the end portions of this expansion. I think that actually creates a very healthy MMORPG where people don't quickly pick it up and drop it and then leave it for months to come, while also simultaneously complaining that there is nothing to do. I think failure can also bring longevity to a game, in a sense that success and accomplishment cannot. Everyone, that is my very long-winded review of the first week of End of Dragons. If you'd like to help support the channel in other ways and get early access to videos, I have a Patreon. Thank you so much, patrons. I really respect you. And I'm pumping out those videos, so I see you, I respect you. And if you'd like to see other Guild Wars 2 videos, perhaps a strike mission guide and overview, click here. And if you'd like to maybe see a map overview and meta-analysis, click here. With that said, everyone, I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone. Mwah.